Yeah, dude, thanks for having me. Look, I think that that's right. I mean, you do get a strong quarter in the September quarter, and that's really gated a little bit by the fact that Apple only had 2 selling days of the new product in the September quarter. So some of that strength, and it is a sell-in quarter for Apple, gets pushed over into December. Now, that said, we've seen what the lead times are doing across the board. And, the iPhone 13 mini and the iPhone 13 are coming much more into supply-demand balance relatively quickly at this point in time relative to the Pro and the Pro Max. Those have been stretched out, I mean, anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, depending on which region you're looking at. So they clearly still have a component issue to deal with on top of all the power issues that they've sort of trying to navigate in China. So there's a whole multitude of supply chain impact that they got to navigate over here. And we'll look forward to hearing an update from them tonight to see whether or not they've been able to successfully meet or at least see if the supply situation is improving on a relative basis as we get into the March quarter.
Wamsi, you're also looking at services, and you expect the strength here to moderate somewhat. Why is that? Is that sort of post-pandemic world? And also, do investors have to start getting worried perhaps about the growth rate, especially considering what Apple is facing in terms of regulatory challenges and App Store fees, and what Google did last week, which was, cut its App Store fees by half?
Yeah, it's a great point, Deirdre. Look, I mean, I think services had a phenomenal quarter last quarter, north of 30%. Going to be hard to replicate that. I think they could do the high 20s in this quarter. So still a deceleration, but extremely strong. I think there's a threshold where investors really start to get worried if services growth dips below 20%. I mean, in the quarter, I think expectations are still north of 25% by and large. But as long as they can maintain north of 20 in the long run, or at least over the next few years, I think the services growth will still be rewarded in the multiple. Now, that said, as you point out, there are these regulatory issues. I think the Epic side of things is going to take a long time to resolve. We don't think that plays into the numbers anytime quickly. However, the Google Antitrust lawsuit has a more powerful impact on Apple because of the big, large licensing payment that they get. And timing on that is hard to call, but we do think that it creates a headwind to the multiple in valuation multiple in aggregate.
On that point, Wamsi, in the wake of the iOS changes, we've seen obviously frustration from the likes of Facebook, who some alumni at least argue that it's an abuse of Apple's power and they're making unreasonable changes that have huge impacts on other companies. Do you think that puts a light on them from an antitrust point or anti-competitive standpoint?
No, I don't particularly think that, Carl. Look, I think that Apple has sort of, really been a huge advocate of privacy right from the very beginning. They've been a very strong contender in light of making changes from a privacy standpoint. And to the degree that you give consumers the choice, whether they want to opt in or out, there is still, it's up to the consumer. So if they really feel like I'm fine with all these apps tracking me all over the place and they choose yes, then it's up to them and the business model can stand. So it's not that it's completely been taken away, but the power is being given to the consumer. So it's very much so, in the hands and the decision of the consumer. It's just enabling and empowering that consumer to have that feel. So in the long run, I think it's very much tied to their healthcare initiatives. Apple has to make sure that the consumer feels that their data sitting on an iOS device is as secure as it can be. And then you can really start to talk about, really increasing the whole perimeter around what they can do with health and healthcare services and your data sitting in there and, completely adhering to all the regulatory issues as well. So I think it's very, very central and thematic concern from an Apple perspective, and they're doing what they can to make sure that the consumer really feels that way.
Hey, Wamsi, it's John. How are you modeling how much of holiday demand is transient? Meaning, I got $1,000 to spend. I might gift it, with an iPhone to someone. Or if there are no iPhones in supply, then I buy a TV or I buy a bag or something else. Certainly, there's got to be some of that. It's not as if every iPhone that's not available ahead of Christmas just gets pushed off to January.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think most people tend to buy a phone when they absolutely need it, right? Your phone's broken, you dropped it. That's the majority. Then you've got people who are sort of on some sort of upgrade cadence, right? They either like the feature set or they're like, well, we didn't buy 5G last year because we didn't want to be the first guys to try it out, but we can buy it this year. So you have some demand that's staggered as well. But I do think that there is demand leakage when you have an issue where supply is so constrained, where you could see that the March quarter does not fulfill everything that got pushed out from the December quarter. So from that perspective, we actually are well below the consensus in terms of when we think about where the iPhone units are going to land for the year, closer to 215 million versus 235 million for the street. So we do think that there is some demand leakage at the end of the day. One other interesting thing to consider is that this year, Apple's quarter sort of started on September 25th, right 2 days after the launch of the iPhone 13, but it ends on December 25th. And when you think about December 25th to the end of the year, that's a time when you have huge sales usually on the App Store. They've highlighted this in the past, and the services will not benefit from that this particular year. So a lot of moving pieces over there. I think that part at least falls into the March quarter, but on the devices, I completely agree with you. I think that some of this is going to be transient, and so we're much more cautious on the outlook in the March quarter and beyond.